Hi, how you doing? I was doing a little bit of plant maintenance earlier, and I've noticed for the past couple of weeks that some are looking a little ratty. One is fairly overgrown, one's getting too tall and gangly, and some of them are just getting a little bit too crowded, or a plant has died. They need maintenance, and I thought I'd take some apart and repot today, and figured maybe you'd like to come along and see what I'm doing. My name is Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to MySaskGarden. Some of the ones I was looking at in particular is this arrangement in here. This one down here is getting a little crowded and there's a dead plant in there. Also, I can divide this Haworthia. This arrangement, although it does look pretty good, it's also pretty crowded. I'm not sure how it'll survive the rest of the winter that crowded. And then this one, I just noticed how tall it is. And this one has a tendency to get a little gangly through the winter, so I think I'm just going to give it a nice chop, a nice haircut, and start something new out of that. So this is my tidy tray down in my grow room. I've mentioned it in a couple of other videos, and it's going to be my work area for the winter time. So I have some soil amendments. The first thing I have here is a bag of cactus, palm, and succulent potting mix. It says it's a fast draining formula, and that's really what you want for cactus and succulents, is to have that kind of a mix. It does have some wood pieces in there, and so I don't want to put a whole lot, but I would add probably about, I guess that's probably about a third of the volume. I'm also going to use a little bit of extra perlite. And that's got a fairly coarse grain, this one. And maybe not quite a scoop of that. The soil mix that I have in here before I added the additives, that's ProMix HP, which is high porosity. It already has quite a bit of perlite added into it, but I like to add a little bit more when I'm doing succulents and cacti. And the final thing I'm going to add is a little bit of silica grit, which is like very fine sand. You could use the more coarser silica grit as well, but this is what I have. And so I'm just going to add like that much. You can see I don't have a specific formula. I do kind of go by what it feels like to me. I then have I have some water, and I'm just going to wet that perlite down a little bit because it does tend to, a little bit of dust comes up in the air and gets caught in your lungs, and you could be coughing forever. It's actually the same thing with the ProMix or any of these dry soils. A little bit of dust in the air, and if you're in an enclosed room, it can get caught in your lungs, and it seems to really like irritating me anyway. I like to use some gloves. I don't like the feeling of all that soil underneath my fingernails. That drives me nuts. And then I have some water. This is the nice thing about this tidy tray, is you can moisten the soil right in the tray. Now I don't want to get it too wet because it is succulents and cacti, and some of them I'll probably be trimming a bit, leaving exposed ends that aren't dried off. I'll get into that a little bit later, but you don't want to put those kinds of ends into very wet soil. So this doesn't stick together, which I like. You know that test. If it sticks into a ball and then and then falls apart, you know it's moist enough, and this doesn't really stick into a bowl. So I think this is really good. So I'm just going to start with taking them apart, getting all the plants out, and then we'll go from there. I'll tell you about the rocks a little later. These containers, I have 2 of these, and they're actually one of those clay bakers. I found it at Value Village, which is a secondhand store. I found it for $5, the top and the bottom. It had been baked in once by the looks of it, by what it appeared. It seemed to have some burnt spots on it. It was clean, but it did look like it had been baked in once, and I wasn't going to use it for food. Plus I have one. I wasn't going to use it for food, but I immediately thought, oh, this would make a really cool looking planter for succulents, and I think it did. So yeah, I'm just going to keep these off to the side for a minute. These were just some pieces that I stuck in the soil, and they have rooted. This is a Haworthia. These plants that I have in this container tolerate low light very well. And you can see that they need some cleaning up there, so we'll divide those up and clean them up a bit. This is also a Haworthia, I believe. Pretty sure that is. And then finally this one. This one was not root bound at all, but it's going to look nicer when it's a little bit divided up, I think. And then this, I do have a bunch of broken terracotta pieces in the bottom that I put in there for drainage, but I think that this time I'm not going to use these because I don't believe it really needs any drainage. Terracotta, and this is unglazed inside, and terracotta is breathable, which is why it's it's a really good choice for cacti and succulents. If your container doesn't have drainage holes, or then you should have it in a nursery container or a plastic pot that inserts into your decorative pot. You shouldn't plant directly into your decorative pot, with any plants actually, but with succulents and cacti, it's too wet. The moisture stays too much down there, and you could tend to have a problem with some rot, root rot in particular. So I think I got all that out. And I'm just going to set this bit aside for compost. This one turned out really pretty, but I do want to divide this one up. Some of the leaves are kind of looking yellow, the older ones, and this is quite a lot in there. It actually the plant lands up needing, or the container lands up needing more room than it actually should need, but only because it comes out like that. The rocks, I'll tell you the story about the rocks now. Everywhere I go in our travels, I pick up a rock. Succulents are pretty forgiving. You don't have to be, yeah, this is root bound. You don't have to be really, super careful. See how that came out? I did water this one a little bit just to try and keep down the dust as I was taking it apart. So this one is I figured this one was kind of root bound, really. There you go. You can see it all down there, all the roots plus all this stuff, which again, I won't use. I say that I won't use this, but it obviously has not hurt the plant one little bit. So I suppose it's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's the story of my rocks. I don't remember where each one came from. I can guess with some of them, but honestly, I don't remember where they came from, but they were somewhere that I've been in another part of the world, and I brought it back home with me. So yeah, these have knitted together quite well. Just try and get it with as much root still as possible. And that one I'll try and divide up. I don't know. That all looks like it's coming from the exact same rosette there, so that might be a little, we'll get to that later. This is the same kind of plant as this, limonifolia, Haworthia, sounds like lemon, I think. I'll put that on the screen. And this big one, lots of roots there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this one. I might have to pot it separately into its own container. So I'm just going to give this a brush. I could give it a wash, but as I said, it didn't have any bugs or anything in the soil, so it was very clean. I think it's going to be okay. So this is what the baker looks like, clay baker looks like. I put these on top just so that if I ever set it down on the table, it's not going to scratch anything. I do kind of move them around from time to time, especially the ones that tolerate the low light. You can put them anywhere in your house in the winter because they're also pretty much dormant and they don't put on a whole lot of growth in the winter. They don't use up a whole lot of water. A lot of my succulents, the cacti in particular, the cacti get watered at, after I bring them in, they get watered at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then sometimes again not till Easter or mid-March. I don't want to promote any growth because then it's not good growth. It's kind of weak, or it could be leggy, it could stretch. And that's kind of the same thing with the succulents. If you're growing any in your house for the winter, they don't need a lot of water. They will be pretty much dormant, and you want to keep that dormancy until the sun gets stronger and you can start watering them more, and then they will start putting on better growth with the higher light, tight growth, which is what you want. You don't want them to get all stretched out and wrangly looking. I think that for this Sansevieria, I'm going to put it in here. As you can see, they're not deep rooted, but they are wide rooted. At the same time, you don't want to give them a very big area to grow. They do like to grow tight. That's going to look nice in there, and it also tolerates really low light, so that can be put easily somewhere in the house without a whole lot of light. However, this is a plastic pot, and it's made to look like terracotta, and it has no drain holes. On the back, I don't know if you could see, it has a little picture of a drill there, which means you can drill this to get some holes. And so we're going to do that. I'm going to do that first. There you go, magic. That's going to be sufficient now for drainage. And it also lets in some air for the roots. I keep little bits of landscape fabric, and I just cut a little bit for the bottom for the hole, and that's just to keep the soil from leaking out. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here to start, because, as I said, it's wider than it is deep. And that actually seems pretty good. You do still want to keep a bit of a lip, not filled right up to the top, because you do want somewhere for the water to sit. And so this is very simple. It's just a matter of doing that. This one will never get big or tall. Again, I don't remember the name, but I will find it. I feel like it's Mikado. And that's it. That's good for now. I will give it some water in a bit when I'm watering the rest of them. But yeah, that'll fit better. I can put it anywhere really. I could have divided this too. I could have picked off like this. This one here is an entire division, you see, right there. So I could have. So then I've already put some soil in this one. I've not filled it all the way up to the top, although pretty close, but I need to keep some room for some of these. This one seems to be a pretty good size, and so I think I'm going to start with this one, probably in the center. You don't want to bury them because you don't want those leaves rotting. You just kind of want them sort of at the growing point that they were before. I'm just going to stick a couple of rocks in there that can be used to stabilize as well. I think when you have succulent arrangements, you should be watching that there's plants that like to be planted together, or they like the same kind of conditions. And these, Haworthia, they will show a lot of stress on their colors when they get too much sun. And so it's better to just learn a little bit about what kind of conditions your plants, these plants in particular, might like. The Echeveria, the ones that look like hens and chicks, but they're meant for inside, they are very high sun plants. You need to give them lots of light. And if you don't, they're going to get really, really leggy. So it's just really beneficial to learn what likes to grow together. These I think I will keep all together as a cluster. So here's one that needs some dividing and cleaning up. And dividing is pretty easy. They should just come apart just like that. Again, Haworthia are pretty forgiving. They're not forgiving of wet soil. They'll rot. And so that's sort of what you need to remember about succulents. They store water in their leaves. And I'll tell you, I had a plant, which plant was it? I don't know if I have it down here. That one that's most common anyway. And I had it in a pot with only half the soil because I had taken some of the plants out of there. And I was leaving that Haworthia basically to die. And I left it all winter long in a dark corner, and it did not die. And I didn't water it that entire time, and it survived. I think I still have plants from it. I'm sure I do, because I landed up feeling sorry for it. And so I repotted it. If you were to pull that off and there was no roots whatsoever, you could still just set that on the soil and it's going to root. This is called a dibbler. You could also use a felt marker, just the tip, the capped end, of course. Or I've also used the eraser end of a pencil. I lose my dibblers more often than anything, so I often have to find something else that I want to use for a dibbler. As you can see, very little rhyme or reason to how I go about things, but that's sort of how I do it. I think these are aloe. I'm not going to put these back in this container because Aloes, actually, this could be the reason why they look like this. They like a higher light. They like a very high light. So I think that I will reroot these and use them at another time. And these two bowls will be mostly Haworthia. There we go. This would look really nice with some top dressing too. You can buy bags of decorative small gravel at Dollar Tree. That's where I've gotten them. They work really good. Just sprinkle it on right from the bag, and you can use a teaspoon to get in between. You can take tiny little shovelfuls to get in between, and yeah, that works really well. This plant was started from cuttings. I had another plant, and I did the same thing. I chopped it off. This plant actually was chopped once before. Just show you here that you can see where I cut it right there, and then you can see where it branched off, and it's still continuing to grow up. So keep that in mind if you're going to chop it, where you're going to chop it. In this case, I'm going to chop this one quite low. I'm going to leave these because they're not very tall. And this one I'm also going to chop maybe about there, and then let new growth start again. And then I'm going to root this top portion to start new plants. So these I'm going to leave. This was also chopped right there, and you can see this is new growth starting up. So for these leaves that fall off, each one of these where it broke, if it's a nice clean break, they're going to root and they're going to grow new plants. So it's going to send out some new roots first, right from that broken off tip. This leaf will feed the roots for a while, and you can leave that leaf until it's almost dried up. And at that point you can cut the leaf off of the rest of the plant and then pot up your little seedling or your little start. Now I'm pulling the rest of these off so that I could poke these in the soil, in a pot of soil. And where I broke those leaves off, those are called nodes, and that's where a root will come out. So when I stick it in the soil, I'm going to stick it in soil and not water it. If you feel you need to water it, you need to let these callus for a few days first before you stick it in soil. But that wet tip where you've just cut it and wet soil it'll lead to rotting of your plant. So I'm just going to cut up these, or pot up these cut bits. I'm just going to put them in a small pot. They don't need much right now because they have no roots. And again, I'm going to put in a little piece of landscape fabric there just to stop the soil from falling out. And I'm going to fill that pretty much right up. Tamp it down just gently, not tight. And I think these will actually just poke right into the soil. You don't even have to use a dibbler or make a hole or anything. And again, these are fresh cut ends, which almost everything you read will say don't plant fresh cut ends, that you need it to callus over a bit. However, I'm not going to water these for probably a week or so, so it's going to be okay. I'll just go over one final thing here. This is the one that I thought I'd break apart, and I would like to get these new rosettes out, but I just don't know. I feel like it's not meant to come apart there. So, but what I am going to do, you see these ones on the bottom that are kind of orange and yellow, these old leaves. I'm going to remove these and see how easy they are to come off. They remove quite easy, and watered, not watered, they all seem to do this. Haworthia do kind of get a little dead looking at the bottom. You do need to groom every once in a while. Get rid of those older leaves. Here I think I'll get rid of all of these leaves down here that are under these new rosettes. And I'll just leave this. I'll leave the rest of this as is. And I'll pot that up again, just like that. But that looks a lot nicer now. Perfect. Thanks very much for watching today. I do appreciate it. I hope you found it helpful, enjoyable, or informative in some way. Look at this, Hoya bloom. If you did enjoy the video, please consider giving me a thumbs up, tell your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again. Have a great day. See you.